I remember when you first told me that you were thinking about tunnels.
When did I first tell you about that?
Years ago.
Okay, it's like a long time ago.
Yeah,
like
I thought you were joking.
Yeah, it was. I was joking, but it's not because of some epiphany that I had one day driving down the 405. That's how it gets translated somehow. I was talking about tunnels for years and years. For probably 5 years or 4 years at least, whenever I'd give a talk and people would ask me about what opportunities do you see in the world, I'd say tunnels. Can someone please build tunnels? So after 4 or 5 years of begging people to build tunnels, and still no tunnels, I was like, okay, I want to build a tunnel. So like maybe I'm missing something here. So I was like basically talking people's ears off of tunnels for several years, and then said, well, let's find out what it takes to build a tunnel. And so I started digging a tunnel. I wanted to start the tunnel from where I could see it from my office at SpaceX. So I said, well, let's just carve off a part of the parking lot across the road so I can see if anything's happening or not. And then we named our first boring machine Godot, because I kept waiting for it. It never came. Finally it did. And we got it going. And now we're making good progress.
I really need to give some thought to like, how can I provide advice that would be most helpful? And I'm not sure I've given enough thought to that to give you the best possible answer. But I think certainly being focused on something that you're confident will have high value to someone else, and just being really rigorous in making that assessment, because people tend to, a natural human tendency is wishful thinking. So a challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that doesn't actually have merit? And that is a really difficult thing to tell. Can you tell the difference between those two things?
Right.
You know? So you need to be sort of very rigorous in your self-analysis. I think certainly extremely tenacious, and then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100 hour weeks every week.
Gosh,
and then
a lot of work.
All those things improve the odds of success.
Okay.
I mean, if other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that in 1 year you will achieve what they achieve. You will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve.
Is the secret to your success to be the CEO of 2 companies at the same time?
No. I think it's...
Because look at the correlation.
Yeah.
Struggling companies, everything's in the craft can in December 2008, so let's take on a new CEO gig. And same for Steve, coming back to Apple. Right?
No, definitely it was not my intention to be CEO of 2 companies. There are certain things that I kind of wanted to, I thought were important to happen, and I thought it was important that there was, that an electric vehicle happened, that there was a success in the electric vehicle arena, because the incumbent companies were convinced that it was not possible to create an electric car that looked good, had a good range performance and so forth, and that even if you did make such a car, it would not sell. Because people had this love of gasoline. So we had to show that it was possible to create a compelling electric car, long range, good looking, all those things. That was a Tesla Roadster. I certainly was I was very, very bookish. I was reading all the time. So I was either reading, working on my computer, reading comics, playing Dungeons & Dragons, that kind of thing.
And I understand Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that wonderful book by Douglas Adams. That was a key book for you. What was it about that book that fired your imagination?
I guess when I was in around 12 or 13, I had kind of an existential crisis, and I was reading various books on trying to figure out the meaning of life, and what does it all mean? Because it started seeming quite meaningless, and then we happen to have like some books by Nietzsche and Schopenhauer in the house, which you should not read at age 14. It's bad. It's really negative. But then I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was like quite positive, I think, and it sort of highlighted an important point, which is that a lot of times the question is harder than the answer, and if you can properly phrase the question, then the answer is the easy part. And so, if to the degree that we can better understand the universe, then we better know what questions to ask, and then whatever the question is that most approximates what's the meaning of life, you know, that's the question we could ultimately get closer to understanding. And so I thought, well, to the degree that we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness and knowledge, human knowledge, then that would be a good thing.
Question that has been discussed over the past couple of days. Should we be considering one-way only trips to Mars? What's the best approach to colonize the planet? Is it, well, what's your view? Is that socially acceptable? Do you think people will sign up to do it?
I think there's plenty of people who will sign up for a one-way trip to Mars. But
maybe if we could have a show of hands, who would consider such an option? I see some, not many, but perhaps enough for a couple of missions.
So certainly be enough. I mean, I think it's sort of like, is it a one-way mission and then you die, or is it one-way mission and you get resupplied? That's a big difference.
Wait for the second option.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think it ends up being a moot point because you want to bring the spaceship back. Like, these spaceships are expensive, okay? They're hard to build. You can't just leave them there. So whether or not people want to come back or not is kind of, like, they can jump on if they want, but they need the spaceship back.
Thank you.
I mean, it's kind of weird. Like, there's like a huge collection of spaceships on Mars over time. Like, it's like, maybe we should send them back. I mean, of course we should send them back.
One of the most difficult choices I've ever faced in life was in 2008. I think I had maybe $30 million left, or $30 or $40 million left in 2008. And I had two choices. I could put it all into one company, and then the other company would definitely die, or split it between the two companies. But if I split it between the two companies, then both might die. And you know, when you put your blood, sweat, and tears into creating something, or building something, it's like a child. And so it's like, which one am I going to let one starve to death? I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I split the money between the two. Fortunately, thank goodness, they both came through.
I've heard people say, listen, he's an out-of-the-box thinker, he's a businessman, he's an entrepreneur, but people that know you say...
Really a businessman, I wouldn't say.
You would say?
I'm not really a business plan.
You're not a businessman? No?
No.
What are you?
I'm sure there's probably lots of analysts on Wall Street who would agree that I'm not a businessman.
Okay, well, what do you think you are?
I'm an engineer.
An engineer?
Yeah.
Is it your dream to conquer the world and make the world a better place? What is your dream?
Like, technology is like magic, you know? I think like technology is the closest thing to magic that we have in the real world. And so I think like engineering, creative engineering is essentially technology development. I guess maybe when I was a kid, like Lord of the Rings is my favorite book.
Is it?
Yeah, and I thought it'd be like, what's the closest thing to being a wizard in the real world? And that's like creating new technologies.
What was your biggest failure, and how did it change you?
Wow, I have to really think hard about that. Failure. Never heard of it.
There's your answer.
Well, there's a ton of failures along the way, that's for sure. As I said, for SpaceX, the first 3 launches failed. And we're just barely able to scrape together enough parts and money to do the 4th launch. If that 4th launch had failed, we would have been dead. So multiple failures along the way. I tried very hard to get the right expertise in for SpaceX. I tried hard to find a great chief engineer for the rocket, but the good chief engineers wouldn't join, and the bad ones, well, there was no point in hiring them. So I ended up being chief engineer of the rocket. So if I could have found somebody better, then we would have maybe had less than 3 failures.
What motivations do people need to harness to try to make change, as opposed to just reading about change? And that's not supposed to be an easy question. I don't think it's this.
Well, like I said, I think if you study engineering and you figure out how to design new things, then it's relatively easy to start a company. You just need to get a few like-minded people with you, and then focus on creating a compelling prototype as soon as possible. And then, there's a strong venture capital industry in this country that will give you funding to take things to the next level, and that's all there is to it. And you might, if you try it a few times, you may or may not succeed. But I think sometimes people fear starting a company too much. You have to say, really, what's the worst that could go wrong? You're not going to starve to death. You're not going to die of exposure. What's the worst that could go wrong?
How do you come with this idea, actually? Sometimes they're pushing the human limit. You are always pushing the human limit. Why?
Well, I think about what technology solution is necessary in order to achieve the particular goal, and then try to make as much progress in that direction. Being a multi-planet species and being out there among the stars is important for the long-term survival of humanity, and that's one reason, kind of like life insurance for life collectively, life as we know it. But then the part that I find personally most motivating is that it creates a sense of adventure, and it makes people excited about the future. If you consider 2 futures, one where we are forever confined to Earth until eventually something terrible happens, or another future where we are out there on many planets, maybe even going beyond the solar system, I think that second version is incredibly exciting and inspiring, and there need to be reasons to get up in the morning. Life can't just be about solving problems. Otherwise, what's the point? There's got to be things that people find inspiring and make life worth living. There's a friend of mine who's got a great saying about creating a company, which is trying to build a company and have it succeed is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. So, what tends to happen is it's sort of quite exciting for the first several months of starting a company, and then reality sets in. Things don't go as well as planned. Customers aren't signing up. The technology or the product isn't working as well as you thought. And then that can sometimes be compounded by a recession, and it can be very, very painful for several years. So I think, frankly, starting a company, I would advise people to have a high pain tolerance.
When did it occur to you that Zip2 might be a success?
Well, when we first started out, I think our ambitions were really quite low. It was really to make enough money to pay the rent.
Yeah, we got a VC give us money. That was, yay! Yeah. We thought it was all over then.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. When we started out in '95, we literally, at the beginning, we had one computer, which would be the web server during the day, and then at night, I'd program on it. And
we'd sleep in the office.
Yeah,
we couldn't afford to have an apartment.
It was cheaper to rent the office than to rent an apartment, so we just rented the office and slept in the office and showered at the YMCA.
Showered at the YMCA. And for me, the worst part was eating at Jack in the Box 3 times a day.
Yeah, man, this like
I'll sleep.
It's really difficult to get food at Palo Alto after like 10 p.m. It's like Jack in the Box and a few other options. So we rotated through the Jack in the Box menu. Through the end of '95, that's essentially we're just sleeping in the office and showering at the YMCA, and then around the end of '95 is when Netscape went public, and then whether or not somebody knew what the internet was, they knew that you could make money on the internet somehow, or even if it's only on the greater fool theory. So when we went and talked to venture capitalists in early '96, there was a much greater interest in what we were doing. In fact, the round closed in like maybe a week or something.
It's crazy. Yeah, we went from sleeping in the office to people throwing, I mean, again, this is a financial crowd, so you guys see these numbers every day, but for us to hear, we'll give you $3 million.
Yeah, it sounded extremely, we thought they were crazy. Like, why would they do that?
It was literally like, these people are insane.
They obviously do not realize we're sleeping in the office.
In fact, when they did fund us, they realized that we were illegal immigrants.
Well, I mean,
yes, we were.
I'd say it's a gray area.
Yeah, yes, we were. We were illegal immigrants. We were sleeping in the office. We didn't have a car. We had one car, but the wheel kept falling off.
But, well, actually, yeah, the wheel did actually fall off the car.
Yes, exactly. And the venture capitalists actually bought us cars.
Yeah, well, they gave us 40 grand.
It was 40 grand to go buy cars, which was, at the time, was more money than we've ever seen.
Yeah.
You need a team around you to deliver a lot of idea. How do you choose your team? Based on what?
Well, I suppose honestly that it tends to be gut feel more than anything else. So when I interview somebody, my interview question is always the same. It's
what do you ask?
I said, tell me the story of your life. And the decisions that you made along the way and why you made them. And then, and also tell me about some of the most difficult problems you worked on and how you solved them. And that question, I think, is very important because the people that really solved the problem, they know exactly how they solved it. They know the little details. And the people that pretended to solve the problem, they can maybe go one level and then they get stuck.
The president's first space policy directive to me was go to the moon, and the word in there is sustainably.
Reusability is fundamental. If you, a fully reusable vehicle will cost 100 times less per flight than an expendable vehicle. And it kind of makes sense. If you think of any other mode of transport, it could be like jet aircraft or cars, bicycles, horses, every other mode of transport, boats, they're all reusable. The weird one that isn't reusable is space.
That's right.
So you can imagine how expensive it would be if every time you flew in a jet that you had to get a new jet,
right.
As opposed to refuel the jet. It would be insanely expensive to fly a jet if it was single use.
There wouldn't be anybody flying.
No, exactly. It would be like a few research flights at extreme expense, and that's all the flying that would occur. I actually don't care at all about money at all, but I do care about us becoming a spacefaring civilization.
Yeah.
And I do know that if we don't achieve full and rapid reusability, it will not happen.
Yeah.
And so that's the only reason I actually want money at all. What I really want to see is, permanent base on the moon, permanently occupied human base on the moon, and us building a city on Mars. That's like, if I can see the beginning of that before I die, I'll die happy. In creating these companies that we thought that we would be successful, I thought that the most likely outcome was failure. But it was still worth doing, even though the odds of success were low. In fact, even for SpaceX, originally what I started doing was not creating a rocket company, but actually was going to do a small mission to Mars, which was just a philanthropic mission where you would send a small greenhouse with seeds and dehydrated gel, and upon landing, hydrate the gel, and you'd have this cool picture of green plants on a red background. And the public tends to respond to precedents and superlatives. So this would be the first life on Mars, furthest that life's ever traveled, and you'd have this great money shot of green plants on a red background. So, I thought that would get people's attention. So, but the expectation for that was no return. So I thought we wouldn't get any, we'd just spend the money on that, and it wouldn't happen.
You wanted to do some things that were of benefit to humanity. Why did you think that? Well, because not everyone does.
Yeah, no. I guess it was, I had sort of an existential crisis of like, what does it all mean, and what's the meaning of life, and
was this 3 a.m. over a beer, or this was more serious?
It probably goes back to high school, I guess.
don't want to give a laboriously long answer, but I was, I had sort of a dark childhood. It wasn't good. Probably partially brought on by reading some of the philosophers. Like, don't ever read Schopenhauer and Nietzsche if you're 14. It's not good.
Yeah, or Ayn Rand either. Too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was just trying to figure out what does it all mean. And actually, when I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I think is a great work of philosophy, that sort of highlighted the point that very often the issue is understanding what questions to ask. And if you can properly frame the question, then the answer is the easy part. So I thought things that expand the scope and scale of the human consciousness and allow us to better ask questions and achieve greater enlightenment, those are good things. And so that's sort of what can we do that's going to most likely lead to that outcome.
Back in '95, there weren't very many people on the internet. And certainly nobody was making any money at all. Most people thought the internet was going to be a fad.
A year ago, Musk sold his software company, Zip2, which enabled newspapers to publish online for $400 million cash.
Receiving cash is cash. I mean, those are just a large number of Ben Franklins.
So this is an ATM. What we're going to do is transform the traditional banking industry.
I do not fit the picture of a banker.
X.com, this is Julie.
Raising $50 million is a matter of making a series of phone calls, and the money is there. I've sunk the great majority of my net worth into X.com, which is the new banking and mutual funds company on the internet that I've started.
Big X.
Exactly. X.com.
I think X.com could absolutely be a multi-billion-dollar bonanza, because if you look at the industry that X is pursuing, it's the biggest sector of the world economy.
I mean, what you've got going on with the internet is it's basically like an earthquake where the epicenter is Silicon Valley, and it's shaking up the whole world.
Elon, you've been compared to Henry Ford, Richard Branson, Steve Jobs. Who do you compare yourself to?
I don't really compare myself to anyone. I mean, it's not. There's certain people that I admire from history that I think are great. Certainly, many of the scientists and engineers and literary figures and so forth. I'm a big fan of Ben Franklin. Who's a scientist and sort of thinker, and he was the kind of guy who did what needed to be done. So like guys like that, I wouldn't say I compare myself in any way, but aren't as excited about space is that we haven't been pushing the frontier as much. And so you can only watch the same movie so many times before it gets a little boring. In the 60s and early 70s, we were really pushing the frontier of human spaceflight. And obviously those landing on the moon is regarded as one of the greatest achievements of humanity, arguably of life itself. And even though only a handful of people went to the moon, vicariously we all went there. Well, at least I wasn't alive at the time, but retrospectively. And it was just one of those really inspiring things that I think made everyone glad to be, human. It's like the things that they're bad things humanity is, and they're good things, and this is one of the good things. And I do think it's important that we have these inspiring things that make you glad to get up in the morning and glad to be a member of the human race. And we need to push that frontier. And I think the great goal we should be trying to pursue is trying to make life make life multiplanetary. Mm-hmm. So to establish a self-sustaining and growing civilization on another planet, Mars being the only realistic possibility. And I think that would just be one of the greatest things humanity could ever try to do.
If you want to know the 5 pieces of life-changing advice from Bill Gates, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
When you have a business that's important as this, with this many competitors, you're going to have people saying some nasty things. The thing that was scary to me wasn't quitting and starting the company. It was when I started hiring my friends